Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from Liverpool Echo. It's Monday. I'm Joe Rimmer and I'm joined by three fine gentlemen. One just moving out shot there to discuss Liverpool's draw with Aston Villa and final home game of the season against Aston Villa. We'll start with you, Theo. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Would have been a bit better if Liverpool had managed to get a win on Saturday. It was a nice send-off for a few of the departing players and means we can be on the beach for this final week, can't we? I think we can officially say top four's gone now, even if it is still mathematically possible.
Well, we'll know a little bit more later, won't we? I think if Newcastle lost later, maybe a bit more would go into the final day. But yeah, I sort of agree. Gorsty, how are you doing?
Yeah, all good. Busy morning as always. Working from home.
Do you want to introduce
inevitably
yourself?
Yeah, the little fella here.
Frankie on your knee.
Yeah, for those watching on YouTube. Yeah. Like Theo says, it's a bit of a frustrating end to the final home game of the season, wasn't it? On Saturday, I'm sure we'll get into it. But enough signs in the last sort of 6 or 7 weeks, 8 weeks that Liverpool are they have turned the corner from what's been a pretty otherwise, a very difficult campaign.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird one because like the result. Just sticking with you, Ghosty, was frustrating, wasn't it? A draw, and they've gone on this 7-match winning streak, and you're sort of hoping they could sneak into the Champions League, but weirdly hasn't felt, even in the aftermath of the game and yesterday and perhaps today, like people are too downhearted over it. It's like missing out on the Champions League isn't the be all and end all that I thought it might have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think people might have reasonably have expected it not to have come, given how poor Liverpool were for certain parts of the season. Probably the poor start they made, the terrible January that they endured, and just disappointing results along the way. You look at when they beat United 7-0 in March, and then they go and lose at Bournemouth the following week. Back-to-back defeats to, I think they were back-to-back anyway, to Forest and Leeds. Just little results like that here and there. I've considered how poor Liverpool have been. The fact that they're only just going to miss out on the Champions League means that if they get their act together next season and back to anywhere near the levels that they have been generally in the last 5 years, that it shouldn't be too much of an issue for them to qualify next season. But they're going to have to take the medicine on this one, and it looks like Thursday nights are going to be the order of the day for Liverpool. And look, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp will rest and rotate for those games, but I see no reason why Liverpool don't have a good enough squad to go and really challenge for that. And it's the one that they kind of haven't won under Klopp, isn't it? So why not go for it? But I think you're right, Joe. I think the reaction to it all has basically been because I don't think anyone's ever really expected Liverpool to get into the top four once they were beaten by Bournemouth in mid-March, so well over 2 months ago now.
Yeah, I mean, Theo, I had this jotted down to speak about at the end, but let's just tackle it now. It has been a weirdly positive end to the season. Obviously, the results have helped that, but does it feel like it's been a reminder that Liverpool aren't far from their best and can be back there next season?
Yeah, to an extent. Like, it has been a strange season, I think, for everyone. Like, you look at all the sides. City haven't run away with it as much as they normally do, yet they're still going to get a ridiculous amount of points. Like, they've got Haaland scoring so many goals, and it still doesn't feel like they've been absolute peak Man City until maybe the last few weeks, and yet they're still going for a treble. And you look at Manchester United, how excited their fans were getting about Ten Hag and all this. They just seem to have been poor for half the season. Newcastle, fair enough, they deserve it. They deserve to be in that top four, but they've drawn a ridiculous amount of games. Arsenal, I think we can look at their results since drawing that 2-2 game at Anfield, and they have choked to an extent. Chelsea guaranteed to finish in the bottom half. Tottenham have just been woeful. Like, that they'll probably finish outside of Europe at this rate if they can't put in a good performance on the final day of the season. So it's not just Liverpool that have been letting themselves down across the campaign. And the fact that they have managed to find form in these last, 6-7 weeks, putting in some good performances. Like Klopp said during this run, we're looking towards next season now. It's about taking lessons from this, what's gone wrong this season, what's gone right this season that we can use next year. And that's why we've seen like Trent doing this inverted fullback role. It's why we're seeing more of Curtis Jones. It's why we've had this back four, which is probably the first choice back four, actually getting a run of games together. We've had Diaz getting more minutes back from injury, Jota getting more minutes, Gakpo just continuing down the middle. It's about taking these lessons into next year, and there are positives there. Like Villa was probably the most disappointing performance in a while, yet there was still that fighting spirit and the fact that they got the late goal at the end. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to sulk now. Bournemouth are already losing to United. Top four's probably out of our reach. We'll just wait for Firmino and Milner to come on and then see out without really doing much. Like Liverpool were pushing forward without really threatening Martinez too much. And they got the goal they pretty much deserved. And there's enough there to be positive. Like new sporting director that's on the verge of being appointed. We know they're interested in McAllister, Mason Mount, Gravenberch. Realistically, we're going to be looking at 4 or 5 signings this summer potentially. You'd imagine they're going to have to spend comfortably more than 100 million. They're going to have the biggest or the most active transfer window since the last time they're out of the Champions League in 16-17. There's enough there to keep Liverpool fans on their toes, to keep them talking, to keep them interested and excited going into the summer. And then if you got rid of the injuries, got this fresh start, they can go again next year. And while you'd say City are in a good place, Arsenal, Newcastle, United are all in a good place, Liverpool are too. Hopefully they'll be in a much stronger position at the end of next season. And we can also talk of, it is this day next year, the Europa League final in Dublin. The countdown starts now, 366 days.
Yeah, that's it. We spoke about that the other day, didn't we? And now won't reveal who, but a former Echo colleague texted this morning saying, "Oh, you're not even going to get the Champions League," laughing at me. But I said to him, it's all about the Europa League now. Don't want the Champions League. Dublin 24 is, I've already started making phone calls to friends in Dublin to sort of sort some accommodation. I think it's on. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. Gorsty, Theo just mentioned a number of teams there, who sort of have in theory had better seasons than Liverpool, but it's a weird one in the sense that personally, if I was betting next season, I'd bet Liverpool to be Man City's closest challengers again. I still think after this run, they've shown us that they've got great quality in the squad, and with 2 or 3 signings, or even more than that, 4 or 5 signings, they could be really right up there and challenging. Do you share that belief? Do you think they've still got more ground to make up?
Yeah, I do actually, because I'm not sure the exact statistic, but I think Liverpool have got the same amount of points as Arsenal since football came back after the World Cup. And if you look at how kind of disappointing some of that has been, that run of form in that run. Certainly January when Liverpool went to Brentford and Wolves and Brighton and they lost all 3. They have still shown in the sort of last 2 months, shall we say, that they can still amass a lot of points and put together a good run. And I think that was always a bit of a thing that held people back, kind of saying that Liverpool were going to get top 4, because there were question marks over whether they still had it in them to go on this kind of run. They're unbeaten now in 9, and okay, Saturday was a bit of a frustrating one, and you can talk about the goalless draw at Chelsea as a bit of a nothing game, and the first half against Arsenal in particular was a poor one. But Liverpool on a 9-game unbeaten run is still a really strong stretch of form, isn't it, over quite a prolonged period. So they can still do it. It's just a case of getting this massive summer right, getting the right players in, and what they do around it that's already at the club. The likes of Stefan Bajcetic, whether he can come forward. Thiago Alcantara, I noticed, was on crutches on Saturday. Looks like he might have already had his surgery to in an effort to make sure that he's there ready for the start of next season. I think he can still be an important player next season along with whoever else comes in. So, across the club, there's still a lot to be excited about. It's just a shame that it's going to be a year out of the Champions League, and I do only expect it to be a year out of it.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I look at the players they've got and the quality they've shown. There've been some real lows this season. You mentioned before, Gorsty, Leeds at home. You look at Leeds now and think, how did Liverpool manage to lose a game to Leeds anywhere? Never mind at Anfield, and then obviously that Brentford game at the turn of the year was awful. Wolves away, but I can't imagine, and I haven't looked, so I might be wrong, but I can't imagine there'd be many teams other than Man City who've gone on a run like Liverpool have just had, unbeaten in 10, winning 7 in a row. I don't think Man United or even Arsenal maybe Arsenal towards the start of the season, but they won't have done that very often. So I just thought it was a reminder of the quality Liverpool have, and I still think if they get it right in the summer, which they do more often than not, they'll pull themselves back above the likes of United. Newcastle, I think, face a really tough time, and whether Arsenal can bounce back, because Liverpool know firsthand after last season how it takes a while sometimes to get over a devastating blow like Arsenal are putting up with now. So it'd be interesting. We're talking about summer signs. We're talking about Liverpool getting that right. Gorsty, today they took one step closer to appointing Julian Ward's replacement, Jorg Schmadtke, formerly of Wolfsburg. Looks like he's going to come out with a short retirement and sign a short-term deal at Liverpool. What's the latest on that? And just says Liverpool will get themselves ready for the summer pretty quickly.
Yeah, so he's set to fly in this week till probably the end of this week. He'll come in to finalise what needs to be done, whether it's just a case of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. I don't know, but Liverpool seem very confident, or people have spoken to that, Liverpool seem very confident that he will be the new sporting director. A little bit of a departure from what Liverpool have been used to under the sporting director model. Obviously, Michael Edwards was first appointed as that title in 2016, and his kind of underling Julian Ward has risen through the ranks to officially become his assistant and then take over the reins, last summer. And this is very much a change in strategy, if you like. He's 59-year-old, cantankerous, outspoken sort of character, if you believe what you listen to and what you read in the German media. But someone who's got a proven track record wherever he's been, under his kind of watchful eye with Wolfsburg, they got back into the Champions League a couple of years ago. That's probably the height of his achievements in German football. But Liverpool's very, I've said that a few times now that Liverpool have certainly been front facing towards next season for quite some time now. Certainly since around the last international break, I think that's when it all crystallised and they accepted that maybe they wouldn't be getting the top four, or that it'd be a really tall order. And that maybe as well that, the X amount of money to price Jude Bellingham away from Dortmund was probably better used elsewhere. And it's all started to gather pace. We were speaking to Virgil van Dijk after the game on Saturday, and he said he was very excited about what's to come in Liverpool's, short to medium-term future. And I think despite missing out on the Champions League, there's still a lot to look forward to. The players who are going to come in, the new sporting director on the agenda, hired to essentially conclude those deals. New Anfield Road project on the way. That'll be completed one in time for next season. So there's still lots to be excited about. And, Jorg Schmadtke is seemingly the guy who's going to come in and overtake Julian Ward. And that seems to be very much a short-term arrangement at the moment, and then plenty of scope for it to develop. The fact that he's had to come out of retirement for it suggests that as much as anything. The fact that he's 59, I think Julian's possibly early 40s, Michael Edwards is maybe 44, 45. So it's a little bit of a change in strategy, but we'll see what comes of it.
The change in strategy, Theo, but one thing that Schmadtke seems to do is he seems to get value, doesn't he? He's been at some unfashionable, should we say, German clubs. He's not known for spending millions upon millions. He sort of shops in a different end of the market. And I don't think this is an indication that Liverpool are doing that, but we know that Liverpool, when they're in the transfer market, look to get as much value as they can, not just in buying players, but selling players as well. Some of his better signings, Anthony Modeste was a bit of a journeyman forward, played in France and then came to Germany, and they brought him in from Hoffenheim at Cologne, and he did very well there. Maim Biram Diouf went to United. We've got a few more here. Bittencourt from Dortmund. So, he's not someone that signs Wout Weghorst. Actually, he signed him. Who signs big name players, but that's what Liverpool do, don't they? Maybe on a bit of a higher scale, but they look to sign players and make them into stars, perhaps, rather than signing always the finished article.
I think that's what makes this an intriguing appointment, because it is the highest platform of his career as a sporting director. He's very much helped clubs be like the Davids to the Goliaths and punch above their weight and get success. Like even his first role, which with Aachen, they were a second division side in Germany. He got them to the cup final, or helped get them to the cup final, which got them into UEFA Cup. and then they won promotion to the Bundesliga, and they're a side that had massive debts at the time. So that was huge for them. Like, we're talking 20 years ago. Former Liverpool striker Eric Meyer was a big part of that. I think he was a captain for when they were winning promotion and all of this. But you kind of want this sporting director who's maybe had to fight more for that success, who's had to be a bit more shrewder, a bit more frugal with the finances, because Liverpool aren't a Manchester City. They're not a Newcastle United. They can't go to whichever player, whichever club they want and go, how much do you want? Here's a blank check for wages and everything. Get it. They need to be a bit more, I suppose, sensible with it, as we've seen from pulling back from Bellingham. And now they're having to balance the books a little bit in terms of spinning so many plates to get the players they need. The fact that he is going to have more quality players to work with, he's going to have more money to work with. Be interesting to see how that translates over what he can do with it. And it's a short-term appointment, as Gorst says, but if it's a success and it does turn into something more long-term and he gets the hunger there to keep on doing it, it could be a successful appointment. And it's one we should be excited for as media as well, because like all fans too, like Michael Edwards only did his open letter, Julian Ward, you don't hear from them. But we're getting this idea that Jorg Schmadtke is very outspoken. And in Germany, they're more outspoken anyway. Like sporting directors, the more general managers, they're doing like interviews every match day. So if we're going to hear from him more than we've heard from Liverpool sporting directors in the past, maybe going to get a bit more insight into what Liverpool are doing behind the scenes in terms of transfers, who they want to bring in. You're just hoping he doesn't fall out with a Jurgen Klopp or anyone like that along the way, because he's apparently got a bit of a reputation for that. But it's not just a one-man show. Like, Liverpool's still got Barry Hunter, Dave Fallows behind the scenes. They've got the whole recruitment team. Klopp's going to be involved. They've pretty much been carrying on as they mean to with the transfer business for this summer. And Schmadtke's just coming in to help get it over the line. So you think it's going to be business as usual for Liverpool, carry on what they've been doing for all these years under Edwards, under Ward, making relatively successful signings for the majority with only a couple of misfires along the way.
That's it, isn't it? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what I think is interesting about this appointment is it's going to be a little bit of a departure for Schmadtke as well. In Germany, the sporting directors are at the very least the kind of equal of the head coaches, aren't they? If not, they're superior. As Theo says, very outspoken in both senses of that. They're not afraid. They're not backwards in coming forward. The team, certainly Schmadtke, from everything you hear, but also as well, they're happy to talk to the media. The likes of Michael Zorc at Dortmund and plenty of others across the Bundesliga. They always seem to be speaking a lot to the media, which is something that Julian Ward and Michael Edwards never ever did. But for Schmadtke, he's perhaps going to have to come in with the acceptance that Jurgen Klopp is still very much the head honcho of the entire football operations. Really, what he says goes, and he'll obviously listen to opinions and value opinions throughout. But ultimately, you can't fall out with Klopp because what he says goes at Liverpool. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing behind the scenes, and obviously we won't find out too much about that, you'd imagine, but it's still going to be an interesting way of working for everyone involved, I guess.
Just before we move on, I think Theo mentioned before, it's a team thing. I do think in recent seasons, probably the fact that they don't talk, the myth of Michael Edwards certainly sort of was like a big thing at Liverpool, wasn't it, recently? Julian Ward to a lesser extent, but we shouldn't forget, should we, Gorsty, that it is a team thing and that there are other people behind the scenes. Barry Hunter, Dave Fallows are obviously big people behind the scenes that we don't hear from, we don't see. A lot of Liverpool fans won't even know what they look like, but these are guys who've worked there for the last 6-7 years, been a big part of what Liverpool do, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's sometimes a little bit of a misconception with sporting directors that they are the guys who identify the players and then essentially go and bring them to the club, and they're not, are they? I think maybe we've probably got to hold our hands up ourselves on this and say that we kind of perpetuated the magic of Michael Edwards maybe more than any other, but it's very much a collective thing. The data, the scouting reports and all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily just Jorg Schmadtke pulling a player out of thin air and saying, right, this is the guy for us, and then go and brings him in. He is very much the lead on the negotiations and the one who's kind of got to be proactive with dealing with agents and the clubs and the negotiation process and all that kind of stuff. But it's not necessarily Schmadtke saying, well, Liverpool want Alexis McAllister, but I'm not that big on him, so instead we're going to sign this guy from Hertha Berlin or whatever it might be. It's that's not particularly how it works. But I also like the fact that he's a bit of an apparently no-nonsense, straightforward operator that surely lends itself towards good negotiating. You'd imagine anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll see arrivals in the summer, but Theo, some emotional farewells on Saturday. Can you remember in recent history, certainly, a player leaving with a bigger outpouring of love than Roberto Firmino? I mean, it has been just several days of Firmino loving, hasn't it? And it was fitting that he would come on and score the equaliser on Saturday. It's a shame he couldn't score a winner, but yeah, I mean, it was an incredible occasion, wasn't it, for him?
Yeah, it was, and I think this is why it's a good thing that he came out and said he was leaving a couple of months ago. Like, you can understand why Sadio Mane didn't last year, because they still had the Champions League final, but it was handled very differently, wasn't it? Like, at least us having these 2 months to work up to it, everyone could prepare for themselves for Firmino is going to go, and there could be this way to pay tribute to him. Because you think of so many players that have been part of this journey over recent years, and there hasn't been that proper send-off. Whether it's just because Liverpool haven't made a big show of it, they've announced after the season they're out of contract, they're going to leave, whether like a Daniel Sturridge or an Alberto Moreno, or you're in the pandemic and fans aren't there, like a Lovren, a Lallana, even Gini Wijnaldum, there's only, 10,000 fans there for his final game, and it was will he, won't he sign a new contract? They were still hinting that he wanted to, but there was that resignation that he wouldn't. We knew Divock Origi was going to leave last year, but injury meant he couldn't play. He still got the same sort of send-off in terms of a lap of honour. But this is that first true send-off. It's like, right, we know you're going to leave. You've been such a club legend. We love you anyway. And you get to go and see him play for that final time. You get to go and see him make that impact and score that decisive goal. It's like Roy at the Rovers sort of stuff. It's not quite the fairy tale of Firmino scoring the goals that gets Liverpool into the top four against the odds. But he's still got that one final point. He's got that 110th goal. We'll see if there's one outing left in his legs, if they let him play against Southampton, or if this is shake your hands, pack up the home and go on holiday now, start your new life already. You can argue both ways, couldn't it? Whether Firmino wants to be part of it or if he wants to make sure he doesn't risk injury and has that Anfield send-off as the perfect farewell. But it's gone on for so many days, isn't it? Like, he had his little party, I think, at Anfield yesterday with his friends, his teammates. But on the way, he went to the mural, didn't he? And you saw all the fans there taking pictures with him, singing his song. Saw it at Leicester, all the away fans chanting for endless amount of time. And he is just this Liverpool legend that you don't have a bad word to say about. Maybe part of that is because he's been barely spoken the whole time he's had his Liverpool career. So there's a bit of a myth about him as well, like what sort of character is. He doesn't speak, he's just always smiling. But he was born to entertain, and you watch him on the pitch, and while he's not sort of like a Coutinho, for example, that would put it in the top corner from 30 yards, but he still always entertained you, whether it was setting up goals with the flamboyant back heels, or just being the man in the right place at the right time to pop up with a last-minute volleyed equaliser against Aston Villa. He's just got so many big moments in his Liverpool career. And he was never the star man, but he didn't want to be. He was happy being that supporting act, and that's what makes you love him even more. But he is, rest assured, one of these biggest Liverpool legends. And like Klopp's been saying in recent weeks, you'll realise how good Salah was when he retires. We'll appreciate Firmino that little bit more now he's soon to be not a Liverpool player, and when he hangs up his boots in the future as well.
Gorst, I think you could say the same about James Milner, who also is departing and got a good send-off on Saturday. I mean, I think Liverpool will miss him around the dressing room, but judging by some quotes from him, it sounds like Klopp was keen to keep him around, but the club perhaps took a bigger decision and decided it was time to part ways. Frankie's not happy about that either.
Yeah, big James Milner fan. Yeah, I mean, Klopp got asked about him earlier in the season, possibly January, and I think he said something like, we've got different ideas, and at the time, it felt as though Klopp wanted to keep him there, but also this idea that we want to keep him here more as a, as a person and a player, if you like, given the importance that he can bring as a coach, off the field in years to come. Yeah, I mean, Milner wants to keep playing, doesn't he? And fair play to him. He's still going strong at the age of 37. So if he can have another year or two in the Premier League, then good luck to him. But no doubt, a Liverpool legend, absolutely.
What is Frankie so upset about? Milner leaving?
There's Milner leaving, Firmino leaving. He always had a soft spot for Navigator, so he's taking a hard the last few days.
Is he one of those people sending Theo some tweets? So the final two departures, we discussed them at length on Friday, so I don't want to go over them, but yeah, also seem to get good send-offs, Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain, Theo.
Yeah, they did, and it is deserved. Like, you can say what you want about the injury records and whether they've lived up to their full potential, but they still depart having won every single trophy and been a big part of this Liverpool chapter. It's a shame that they too couldn't get those final appearances, but you think there's probably an agreement there behind the scenes that they wouldn't, just because the injuries they have. You don't want them to come on for 5 minutes and then to, I don't know, tear a muscle, be out for 3 months, and then it derails them for finding that next club. Oxlade-Chamberlain hasn't actually, I don't think, been injured for much this season since he came back in after pre-season, but he's not been in the matchday squad since that City game. Like, Liverpool got other players back from injury and they have phased him out. Whereas Naby Keita, it's been a bit more curious. Like, he hasn't played since getting subbed at half-time against Crystal Palace. He got an injury in the March international break, and then you see him running outside. Klopp doesn't say he's a long-term absentee, but he's still not been back in team training. So maybe then that's just a protection for him in the long term. Like, you don't need to throw him in for a game on the off chance it gets in top four when you've got other options there. But their stories for Liverpool won't be decided by the odd substitute appearance here and there. Now it'll be what they've achieved earlier in their careers when Liverpool were winning the trophies, whereas Firmino and Milner, they've still contributed right the way to that final whistle. Like, it's Milner who takes a free quickly and passes it over to Harvey Elliott for Firmino's equaliser. We've already talked about Firmino's goals. There will be big players to replace because of the quality they showed when they were fit, when they were available, and they're just valuable squad players as well. Like, the fact that you could have a first-choice Liverpool midfield at their peaks of Henderson, Fabinho and Thiago, and you could still have Thiago pushing to get into that. And he did many times last season, be it Thiago getting injured in a League Cup final, he came in for the FA Cup semi-final. He played a lot of big games, Naby Keita. Oxlade-Chamberlain less so, but he still stepped up when they're players at the Africa Cup of Nations or they're injured, scored goals. That's almost as hard to replace, because what you talk about Liverpool's starting 11, you want that as strong as possible. But as Man City have shown, it helps if you've got quality off the bench that can come in and make it pretty seamless as well. Like, City's bench yesterday was absolutely ridiculous, wasn't it? Like, those 9 men could have beaten many a team in the Premier League. That shows how strong their squad is. So whoever replaces a Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, can pick up that mantle and do exactly the same thing without the injuries.
The game itself, Gorst, it was a bit of a frustrating one, but there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight. First of all, a pretty baffling VAR decision. Saw Cody Gakpo's equaliser ruled out. I've watched it a few times since. I was just watching it just before we came on this podcast. Still can't really work out why the referee's chosen to decide that the touch from the Aston Villa defender wasn't deliberate. Perhaps the direction that it got sent wasn't deliberate, but certainly looks to me like he tries to play it. I mean, is this just another example of how VAR makes things just so much more complicated?
Yeah, I mean, we were in the ground, obviously, and we didn't really know why it was not given. We didn't know who was offside, or that it was Diaz or Van Dijk or whatever. And then you realise that the referee has not made an objective call with offside. He's gone to the monitor and decided that Ezri Konsa's kind of flick was not deliberate. So Van Dijk, as a result, is offside as opposed to being onside from that touch. A bit of a nonsense of a decision, that one. To be honest, I don't think anyone can say for certain that Ezri Konsa didn't mean to touch that. It looks certainly like he tries to kind of just heel it away for a corner kick and can't quite get enough on it, and then Van Dijk is active again. The conspiracy theorists are out suggesting that John Brooks, who was of course the official who Jurgen Klopp shouted or celebrated in the face of a couple of weeks ago in Tottenham, was out to maybe prove a point. Don't over buy into all of that, but it's an easy one to reach for, isn't it, when you see officials making strange decisions like this? I hate talking about referees. I think it's the most boring, reductive conversation you can ever have. But when you see the cast iron mistakes that they are making like this, you do start to, you're left with no choice but to moan about it either, or critique it. And us as journalists, I suppose, are different to fans, where fans are rightly going to be unhappy with the fact that Cody Gakpo's goal is ruled out, the fact that Tyrone Mings doesn't get sent off despite leaving a huge kind of scab right the way down Cody Gakpo's chest. Strange decisions. Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But yeah, it really was a baffling one for me, the goal, because Konza absolutely definitely is trying to get that away for a corner.
Well, even if he's not trying to put it out for a corner, he's reaching to touch the ball. So therefore, it's deliberate, isn't it, Theo? If he interferes with play, and it's a deliberate action, isn't it? That's what I don't understand. It's not as if he was facing the opposite direction; it just rebounded off him.
Yeah, exactly. That is not deliberate. If he's facing the wrong way, it's bounced off his head, and he's gone behind for a corner that way. But then if he's facing the wrong way and it's come off the back of his head, then he's doing something considerably wrong, considering he's basically in the 6-yard box when he attempts to clear this. Like, if you're a defender in the 6-yard box and a cross is coming in or whatever, you are trying to clear it. He is trying to get that ball out. It doesn't matter who any of the Liverpool players are, where they are. A ball is in the box. It is close to goal. The defender is trying to get it out of play. Just because he makes an absolute mess of it and it falls to Van Dijk doesn't change from that fact. Like, if he'd half cleared it and it had gone the right way, it's a goal, isn't it? It's fine. Like, if Curtis Jones or whatever, it falls to them, they bend it in. And it's just a really weird way to view the rule. Like, when VAR came in, it was supposed to clear up the obvious errors of the officiating teams. You're supposed to, at the same time, give the benefit of the doubt to the attacking team. Like, you want to see goals. You don't want to go to a game and see a 0-0. If it's slightest margin on offside, like we saw with Curtis Jones's pretty much both his goals against Leicester, like, if they'd done the actual margin, say, oh, he's offside here, and it's that tiniest margin, no one wants to see that. You want to see the benefit of the doubt because you want to see goals. So with this one, when it is so subjective and everyone's looking at it and going, well, he's clearly meant to play that, for them to decide, oh, he's not meant to go that way, so it's not deliberate. It's just a baffling reading of the rule. It's something that we said before. They need to have another look at VAR, how they address it. But it seems like if no one wants to make a decision themselves, do they? Like, the referees, they want to still have some sort of control on it. They want to have that power, but the VAR doesn't want to go and say, we're not really sure about this one, so just give benefit of the doubt. It's still very hard, and it makes a mess of things. Like, granted, Liverpool probably didn't deserve to win against Aston Villa, and Villa would be a bit aggrieved if Firmino's goal was actually a late winner. But Cody Gakpo scored a goal that I think 95% of football fans will think, yep, that should have been a goal. And if their team had scored it, yep, they're fuming, it should have been a goal. And if you concede it, you just sort of accept that, yeah, it probably should count. It's a really weird way for them to decide it wasn't deliberate.
It just adds an extra layer of confusion onto, people have moaned about referees since the beginning of time. It's not going to change. And I think VAR was meant to perhaps take the pressure off them, but I think by sending John Brooks that monitor and saying to him, go on, do you think that this is deliberate or not? He's then made the decision where he says, well, I think it is deliberate. He isn't deliberate. It means that we can watch that replay time and time again and say, how in the world did he think that wasn't deliberate? And it just makes for him life even more difficult. So I think they've put more pressure on referees with VAR, and it's not really solved a great deal. I don't mind goal line. Goal line is it's black and white, isn't it? You know exactly what it is. Even offsides to an extent, but getting sent to the monitor and being made to relook at things, I think, can make things difficult. Just quickly, I didn't think that the Mings one was a sending off. Granted, it looked pretty gruesome afterwards. But I don't necessarily think that every injury suffered on a football field should result in a sending off. I think if you look back on the Jota one against Tottenham, if you didn't think that was a red card, which I didn't, it was an attempt to play the ball, then I don't really think you can think the same with Mings. I thought, he sort of, the contact, it's not an aggressive contact, is it? So it's just a difficult one. And yeah, I think VAR puts more spotlight on these decisions than perhaps necessary. And apart from the fact that all of that is that you guys were in the stadium, I didn't even know what was going on, why a goal was ruled out. And those inside the stadium, I think, should be the people that are certainly looked after. And for you to not know what's going on, I think is pretty poor as well. So it's not a good situation. Neither is the amount of time wasting that is going on. And look, I mean, again, it stinks of sour grapes a little, doesn't it, when you're moaning about time wasting after a game? But I do think that we are seeing more and more teams time waste. I mean, Newcastle are one of the worst defenders this season, and they're in the top 4. So it's not just, smaller clubs trying to get an advantage. So, Gorst, what did you think of that on Saturday? Is it just something that fans of clubs like Liverpool have to suck up, or is it a problem now in football? Because granted, they did add 10 minutes on the end, which I think was good. But as Klopp said, within that 10 minutes, there's more time wasted again, and yellow cards for goalkeepers. It makes no difference, does it? A goalkeeper will take that booking all day long.
Yeah, I think they added on 21 minutes in total, didn't he? But I think Aston Villa have had 7 yellow cards on for time wasting this season. 3 of them were at Anfield on Saturday, and
that's what they said in the post-match press conference.
Yeah, it's funny because referees pretend like they're all wise to your antics and whatever else, and you think, oh well, I'm adding it on. You can carry on doing all that, but I'm adding it on, and then you get a booking for time wasting. But there's absolutely no chance that Martinez was ever going to be sent off for time wasting, for 2 bookable offences for time wasting. So the referee can book him once, and Martinez is happy to take that all day long because he's not going to get booked X amount of times to be suspended, is he? So referees can try and pretend that they're wise to it, but it could go on for as long as they wanted. Martinez could have kept hold of that ball for 5 straight minutes, and he would not have got sent off. It's just frustrating to watch it as a spectator, isn't it, when you see it happening? I think there was a kind of study into it earlier this season in terms of how often the ball's in play for games, and it's only ever between like 55 and 60 minutes or something like that. There was a little bit of a crackdown to get wise to it during the World Cup. A lot of those games seem to be 6, 7, 8 minutes added on for first half and second half. But yeah, it does disrupt the game. But I think, to be fair to Aston Villa, they had a plan to frustrate and get Anfield a little bit anxious and a little bit annoyed, and it worked to a T. Supporters were frustrated, the players were getting annoyed, and I don't think Liverpool really deserved to win, to be honest. But I did think that once they scored and that 10 minutes went up, I thought it was all set for a Firmino winner, but it wasn't quite to be.
No, it's not really about whether Liverpool deserve it or not, Theo, but it's just in the sense that sometimes I get quite frustrated that the inaction towards time wasting, the 10 minutes added on, and I'm sure people who think the opposite would say, but there were 10 minutes added on the end. But, I sometimes think the referee within that 10 minutes should be saying, well, we're playing 10 minutes. And if you hold on to the ball out of play or whatever, it keeps going on, and we'll play another 15 if we have to, because we're going to make sure that ball's in play and that you're not running the clock down. I mean, I go back to, remember when Simon Mignolet was booked for holding the ball and gave an indirect free kick away for holding the ball too long it was against Bordeaux in the Europa League. I've never ever seen a goalkeeper punished for that before or since. It was one of the strangest punishments, and he got a lot of stick for that. And I thought, well, he was fully within his rights not to expect to be punished for it. But we never see that. We never see a goalkeeper catch the ball and then told to sort of get on with play. Instead, they seem to bend the rules. So is again, Theo, sour grapes, or is there something that could be done, or is it just one of those things that you just have to put up with?
Maybe that's the answer. Indirect free kicks. Like, as Gorsty said, there's no real punishment. 1 yellow card. Like, the worst thing that's going to happen is you pick up 5 or 10 before the cutoff point and you get a suspension. You play that gamble, don't you? There are things that can be done. I think timekeeping in the game is very inconsistent. Like, we can say, you've added on however many minutes for time wasting, but it still adds up to a hell of a lot more. There are games when, if you break it all down, say 30 seconds for a substitution, 30 seconds for a goal. Well, we're getting a lot more substitutions in games now for a start. There is different ways you can manage the clock here. You could just stop it every time the ball goes out of play and then sort of do it like rugby. Right, clock's at 90 minutes, no stoppage time. Next time it goes out of play, it's game over. There are ways to manage it here. But then at the same time, you don't begrudge sides using these tactics. Like, Liverpool have used these tactics before in the past. Like when you 4-0 up against Barcelona in a Champions League semi-final, you hold it in the corner, don't you? You try and see the game out. It's just when sides like Villa come to Anfield, and it's so obvious from the very first minute that is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to try and kill the game at every moment, take the momentum out of it. Any small knock or injury, go to floor, absolutely milk it, Goalkeepers grab the ball, going to go down to the floor and take ages to kick it out. It's ridiculous. But then there's a hypocrisy to it as well, because there was one where Luka Dean went down injured in the first half, I think clutching his back. And he was injured, let's be honest, because he took a second knock to the back in the second half, got really booed for it, but he actually went off injured. So he was clearly feeling something. But he went down, and he was down for an absolute age. Liverpool got the ball back, they counter-attacked, but they should have just pumped it long, because he'd have been playing them all onside. They didn't realise that. But Emre was screaming up and down, jumping up and down on the sidelines, going absolutely mental as Digne's still down, clutching his back. Yet he suddenly stops when Villa get the ball back and go on the counter-attack themselves. And then suddenly Digne's back to his feet, sprinting forward to try and join the attack. They don't help themselves here. But then I think there's lots of things in the game where if you really wanted to properly approach it, you can say, this isn't okay, this isn't okay, this is okay. What are we going to do to solve this problem? VAR is one, officiating is another, time wasting is that. But football's always been stuck in its ways. It's like, this is just tradition. This is what we're used to. I think how long it took for goal line technology to come in. And it's only because, as you said, that's black and white. No one has any complaints about that. But these other things that are a little bit more grey, there's always going to be debates and disagreement.
Well, no time wasting here. I think that wraps us up quite nicely. At the end of this podcast, we'll be back on Friday to look ahead to that game against Southampton, the final one of the 22-23 Premier League season, and look ahead to the summer and all that comes with it. We'll see you then. Ta-ra.